Sound all right? All right. We all good, Anna?
All right, yes.
All right. We'll jump right into it then. Welcome. Can everybody see me all right? Good, good. Okay. So here's the agenda. We'll talk about first who I am a little bit. I don't know what all Anna told you, but we'll get into that. We're going to talk about ethos a little bit, introductions, how to start presentations, and how to address weaknesses. We'll talk about commanding attention. We'll go through a number of strategies that you can use to always ensure that your audience is giving you the full attention that you need whenever you are making your key points in your presentation. So without further ado, let's jump right in. The first thing, who am I? Well, my name is Evan, as Anna probably said, and I am the marketing specialist here in beautiful Denver, Colorado for DSR. I live here with my girlfriend and my dog. And the first tip of the day is if you want people to like you right out of the gate, show them a picture of your dog. So there you go. This is my dog. A little bit about my background. I studied operations and strategic management and marketing at Washington University in St. Louis. During my time there, I had the opportunity to work at a couple large brands, namely doing e-commerce for Famous Footwear and brand marketing for Red Bull. And then during my time at WashU, I was a teaching assistant for a class called Management Communications. And so the reason I bring this up is because a large portion of our presentation is going to come from what I used to teach in that class. And it just so happened that the professor who I studied under, my sensei of sorts, was one of the top 40 professors for business in the entire country. So I learned a lot of great stuff, got to teach a lot of people some business skills, public speaking, presenting, cover letter writing, resume writing, all those sorts of things, communications. And hopefully I can convey some of the best tips to you guys today. So we're going to start with ethos. Now, ethos, you may have heard of this before. Ethos is part of the rhetorical triangle. And these are sort of the three main points in any good presentation or any good argument. So pathos deals with the emotion and the story of the argument. Logos has to do with the logic and the reasoning, and oftentimes that is taken care of before you even start your presentation. But the thing we're going to focus the most on today is that ethos, that credibility part. How can we build some trust with our audience, and how can we also present in a way that is effective and makes people want to have a conversation with us? Whatever your goal is for your presentation, having a good ethos and a good understanding of how to get that trustworthiness with your audience is super, super important. So that's what we're going to focus most on today. So why did I give such a detailed background about myself if I was going to simply give you a presentation about presentations? Why do you need to know my background? Well, up front, you might be thinking, why is this young guy going to be teaching me about professional skills? So right out of the gate, I try to deliver a little bit of information that you guys can use to answer some questions you might have about me, namely these. Once again, why is this young guy teaching me professional skills? Does he have any experience at companies or learning from people who know what they're doing? And isn't this stuff common sense? Can it really be taught? So the idea behind giving you the little bit of information about myself early on was to hopefully answer these questions for you up front so that you didn't have to be concerned about them when I start giving you real information. So these are some of the questions you might address. And the first one is obviously one that's really important for an international audience. A lot of you, I'm sure, have been faced with the reality that business conferences and presentations are often in English. And so for you, it might even be that you're nervous about an accent or having to give a presentation in a second language. And so with this understanding of ethos in our introductions, the thing that's best to do is to come out of the gate right away and just address these questions up front. Let people know, hi, this is me, this is my team, and we're from here. So people don't have any issues, they don't have any questions, they simply get over that question that they had in their mind, and now they're ready to focus on the presentation that you're delivering. So a point about weaknesses, you might be thinking that, I really know and have expertise about the thing that I'm going to present, but I don't like presenting because I talk too fast, or I stutter, or I get really sweaty on stage. Something that's out of the blue, right? That holds you back from wanting to do those presentations. And I have to say a quick thing about weaknesses that comes from psychology. So this is a really famous study that was initially done at the University of Minnesota in the 60s. And the idea was that they were conducting interviews with students, and the independent variable, the variable that they were changing, was whether or not the student decided, or whether or not the student spilled coffee on themselves during the interview. And the result is kind of interesting. What they found was that interviewees that spilled coffee on themselves turned out to be more likable than the other students, but at the same time, that was only when they were perceived as highly competent. So I want to make a couple points about this right up front. You don't need to be perfect as a presenter during a presentation, especially a technical presentation. We're going to assume that you've done the hard work in preparing up front. You know your technology inside out. You know your points and the logic of what you want to present. So you should consider that your competence is already there. The truth is that people like to see your humanity. Presenting perfectly can oftentimes make it seem a little bit rehearsed, a little bit unnatural. So going up loose, making a mistake and having to laugh it off or tell the audience whoops actually might work in your favor. So as long as the content is good, the key here would be to relax. And while I'm not going to talk in this presentation mostly about how to manage your stress, the first tip about stress I would give you is to smile or laugh, because our body informs our brain, and it is a universal language amongst people. In fact, another interesting study for you that some scientists have done shows that when you're asked to do tasks while putting a pen in your mouth like this, the physical muscles that make your mouth hold that way and allow your face to do that are the same that help you smile. And if you do that while doing an activity, you'll actually rate it higher afterwards. It's super strange, but everything we're doing with our bodies is going to affect how we feel about the presentation. And that's super important because a lot of us are going to go up nervous and tight, and that's going to make your presentation appear that way. So the best thing you can do is smile, crack a joke, and practice, and get in front of people as much as you can. So now let's talk about some actual tips, some little things you can use during your presentation that will help make you slightly more effective. And it's that increment that matters. We want to get the peak attention for our main points. So let's talk about attention span briefly. This is a graph of shot lengths in movies from 1930 to 1920. And as you can see, we've gotten a lot better at making movies over the years. And what we've noticed is that movies are more enjoyable when they have shorter shots. And the reason is that as soon as you have someone's attention, it begins to diminish. So what we need to do is have some strategies in our presentations that allow us to re-peak that focus. Here's what a graph of attention looks like over time. As you can see, when it reaches a peak, it's immediately declining. So these tricks, we're going to talk about slide changing, pace and volume, stage presence, body language, and supporting on stage briefly. And all of these things are going to help us both peak that attention and hopefully retain it and direct it in the right way. So let's first talk about slide changes. So there's not a whole lot to say about slide changes here. In fact, you can get it here. And the reason that's important is because I can actually flip through 1, 2, 3 slides and have you looking at the screen that whole time while only delivering a rather short point. And so I want you to pay attention through the rest of the presentation, how I might use slides to direct your attention around the screen or back to me when delivering more complicated points. So moving on to pacing and volume, a couple more graphs for you. Let's say we have a fixed amount of attention on the left for any given moment. Now, the more words we use, if we look at this graph of attention in words, gives us some hint as to why exactly we might want to speak at different speeds in terms of what's important in our presentation. So let's take this graph of attention over words again. So as words increases, attention per word decreases. So it follows that the most important things we want to say the slowest. And that lets the audience know that what we're saying is important. And the things that are least important for context are going to be said quicker and with more words. So once again, we want to deliver the most important points with the least words. So what does this look like? When you're saying the most important part of your presentation, what do you do? And the answer is you hang on every word. And that's exaggerated, but if you remember anything from today, it might just be that. It might be when I slowed it way down. And that's just how effective it can be to use a few less words to make your key point. It tells the viewer, oh, I have to pay attention to this. He's slowed down. He's delivering, important words. And that's a peak in that attention graph. And obviously then I have a few moments to deliver really key information. So let's talk about stage presence. And this is a little bit about not taking attention away from the important things. So here we have a screen and a stage. And this is a little less important if you don't have a screen behind you. You can be a little more free flowing with this. But for the sake of this presentation, I want to talk about if you're in a big auditorium and you've got a screen, right? The biggest presentation you can think of and how you might navigate that. So first, you want to be aware of the field of view. You want to look at your audience and say, can everybody see the screen? You want to make sure that you're not going to obstruct that in any way. And when you are important, when you're delivering the information and you don't need people to be viewing slides, stand in that field of view. The only caveat being that you want to be aware sometimes of some environmental elements. So my second stress tip would be to know or control your environment when you can. And one of my favorite things to do that really polishes off presentations and can really set you apart, especially when you're following people or you have people going after you, is to get up on that stage before anyone presents. So if that's early in the morning or the day before, for instance, I had this webinar studio set up a couple days ago to test it out. The reason being is that if you can control a lot of variables going in, you have less to worry about. And one of the variables for me, for instance, is I'm quite tall. So when I give presentations in front of projector screens, I have to be careful that I'm not casting a shadow on the screen behind me. So I do like to get into those auditoriums early sometimes, stand in front of the screen, figure out where on the stage I need to stand in front of in order not to cast a shadow. And then additionally, you can use standing outside of the main field of view and gesturing to the screen as a way to ask people to direct their attention to maybe a more technical slide or a graph that you need their attention on. So using your position on the stage is just another way you can signal a different shot to people who are at your presentation and re-pique that interest in what you're saying. All right, let's move on to body language. And now this might be one of it's most intuitive, but most difficult things to achieve is comfortable body language on stage. So let's just look at some pictures really quick. This guy is wonderful with his body language. And what you'll realize is that people who are good on stage are quite exaggerated. If you're looking at these pictures here, you might already have a good understanding of what he's trying to tell you simply based on his palms, his face, and his overall posture. So he might be saying, imagine this. He's telling you to hold up for a second. I have something to tell you. Imagine this. Or the third thing. So this is point 1 is important. Point 2 is important. Now we're on point 3. This is also important. And if you look here, and all of these things might seem a little circus clown inspired. Like you might think, why do I want to move that much on stage? Won't that look weird? But you have to remember that in any presentation, you are the focal point of the room and your gestures need to be available to everyone. So listen to your brain. A lot of these gestures are super innate. They're baked into us and we can't betray them. So if your hands want to do something, it's often good to let them do that. Talk with expression and really point people in the direction you want them to go. Another sort of funny point I want to make about body language is this one. And if you catch yourself doing this, you're probably pretty comfortable on stage. Just do this in front of your computer for a second. Touch those fingertips together. And you might feel, I don't know, like you have a scheme, a good idea. This is one of the best positions a speaker can take to show that they are in control or that they're listening attentively. So I really do like when engaging with the audience and when I'm not, when I want their focus on me, to have that high power triangle. And it's weird to make yourself do that at first, but it's super effective. And then when I'm listening, the triangle down, as you can't really see here on the webinar, but as Angela Merkel in the middle and Donald Trump are doing it, the down triangle is oftentimes signifying that my attention is on you and I'm focused on what you're saying. All right, so the final little piece of working the crowd I want to talk about is sometimes less important because you might be giving a presentation alone, but supporting on stage and having to be a person on stage who's not presenting or having other people on stage with you can really hurt your presentation if they're not behaved properly. And so we're bringing back up the stage diagram a little bit here. People who are not presenting should stand outside of that main POV and out of the way as much as they can in terms of the audience viewing the screen. Now, the best thing you could do as a supporter on stage is to guide the audience with your eyes and with your face that in such a way that assists your presenter in whatever they're saying. So if what the presenter is saying is important and you're on stage in a supporting role, make sure you're giving them your full attention. It's distracting for audience members to see you looking at them and making eye contact. So the best thing you can do is to pretend to be an audience member, be respectful, and watch your presenter, and then look at the screen when that's where they want the audience's attention. So because you're on stage and the audience is seeing you in their periphery, you can give them really, really good context clues into what they should be doing with their attention. And so you can actually help amplify what your main speaker is doing. And then a couple more things. Keep your hands in a neutral position, such as crossed in front of you or behind you, and try not to make movements like swaying or tapping your foot or tapping your hands or playing with your thumbs. Those kind of things will grab an audience member's attention and completely remove them from the conversation. And that's definitely not something you want to happen in a really important presentation. I'm going to talk briefly about slides, but I don't want anyone to consider these to be hard and fast rules. Oftentimes, if you're giving technical presentations, a lot of this will go out the window. So it's important to remember the point I made about attention and that that's the overall focus when we talk about slides. So generally, good rule of thumb when it comes to slide design includes using lists of 3 or multiples of 3. We generally remember things in groups of 3 a little bit better. So if you really do intend to rely on a slide to make an impactful point that people are going to remember, try to keep that to 3 in your list and use no more than 30 words. If you're trying to say something important and people are really worried about reading the screen, that can get quite distracting. So do, as I've tried to show throughout this PowerPoint, and highlight those important points as you go through so you can help lead the attention around the screen and back to yourself when you want it. Remember, you are in control. Additionally, and on that point about using slide changes and leading people's eyes around the screen, you might not always want to introduce all of the slide information at one time. So if you remember the pacing and volume slide where I wanted to deliver the thought about the importance of speaking slowly and then also speak slowly for an example, I introduced the slide with 8 slides, but 1 slide concept. So this presentation is something like 25 slide concepts and more than 70 slides. So the reason you do that is because you might have a lot of information that you want to give on a slide, especially here in webinar format, but you don't want people to be so distracted about trying to take in all the information you provided on that slide at one time. Instead, tell them when they should be focused on the information. All right, so we went through a whole bunch of tips really, really quickly, but I'm going to try to succinctly put them in some takeaways that even if you're not going to employ some tactics, there's some things to think about that will make you a better presenter going forward. Trust your expertise. Remember, competence is what you're going to be reviewed on in terms of people's likability towards you. So if you have expertise, and you have solid logic and you've done your preparation for your presentation, this part shouldn't be a problem. Believe in yourself and know that what you're presenting is good. And then be honest. The second part of that coin is to not be too robotic. When you start presenting, the only way to get more comfortable is to do it a lot. And so you're obviously going to be practicing quite a bit. And so the things I would say to control that stress are control what you can, get in front of the variables that you see coming and take care of them so you don't have to think about them on presentation day. Present the information through yourself. Remember, you are the presenter. If you're up there and your slides are doing all the work, people are going to think that it's weird and distracting that you're there. So don't allow that to happen. And then finally, smile. This is going to wrap up all the things together in one piece. Remember, it's your humanity plus your competence that people are paying attention to. So flashing a big smile early on in the presentation, convincing people that you're relaxed and they should trust going through that presentation with you is going to go a long way in smoothing over anything that might happen. You never know what variables might come up when you're going to give a presentation. So the best thing you can do is show that you're relaxed, you're smiling, and that people can trust you, because if anything were to go wrong, you have to move on and you still have to make the presentation. And so the stress tip from me on this would be to practice for impact and not perfection. Like I said, early on, you're probably going to be practicing more because you're more worried about missing a point or stumbling over your words. And that's totally understandable. But the more and more you get on stage, you realize that that is the key practice. And once you get comfortable being on stage more and more and those other variables don't throw you off, it's better to actually take the practice of your presentations down a little bit, because you want to be delivering them in that human way, that honest way that people don't feel like is over-rehearsed. And in fact, if you make a mistake or two along the way, when you're delivering with that honesty, you're still going to be considered more likable to the audience because you're showing your humanity. So I hope that some of these tips were useful. And with that, I would love to open it up to any questions you guys have and you've been sharing with Anna during this.
Evan, thank you. Great presentation. And we have a question in the chat. Dmitry asked you about successful and unsuccessful presentation, maybe from YouTube or TED conference.
I'm sorry.
But could you share, maybe not now, later?
I lost you a little bit there.
Could you share the examples of successful or unsuccessful presentation? Maybe not now, maybe later we will send the links to this presentation.
Oh yeah, I can try to come up with some examples of that for sure. But I think maybe if someone wants an example of good success, the best one I always think to lean back on, and it's not because of my opinion of Apple whatsoever, but it's the way Steve Jobs presented the iPhone. If you want a real understanding of an impactful presentation, I would watch the iPhone reveal. Because if we remember back in that time, he was presenting something that was an abstract concept. It was taking cell phones that were flip phones at the time and saying, what if we roll up all these features into this one device that was going to be the rest of your life? And that presentation really changed the world. And what he was doing was mostly standing with just the device in front of a screen that wasn't saying very much. And his effectiveness is incredible. So if you want to watch someone who's comfortable on stage, they're not worried about making it look too professional. In fact, they're just up there telling their story. Watch Steve Jobs present the iPhone. Any more questions?
Thank you. You can type questions. Okay, from Renata. Hi, Evan, you are talking about station of a well-prepared presentation. What if you are standing in front of a lot of people and completely lost your thought? Good question. Thank you, Renata.
Yeah, so this is one of those things, right? Prepare to deliver the impact. Generally, you forget what you're saying when you're concerned about sticking to a script. So generally we present on things that we are professionals in, that we know how to do. So if you know how to do things, it's good to go into the presentation not thinking, I need to say everything in perfect order, but to just think, these are the main points I have to hit. It's generally easy to remember. And in the worst case scenario, if you do forget and you're completely silent and blanked out in front of people, put on a smile, laugh, and say, I forgot what I was going to say. And everybody can relate to that. It's important to be human and not to be distracting from what you're doing. Speaking of distracting, give me one moment. I don't know if you can tell, but this light is flickering on my webcam, but it is. Hopefully that's a little better. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Any more questions, Anna?
Yes, we have two questions. From Max. Hi, Evan. Would you call Apple's keynote events of the last few years to be successful?
Which keynote? Come again?
Keynote
Sorry.
events.
Which ones are successful?
Of the last few years to be successful. Would you call Apple's keynote events of the last few years to be successful?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Like what? Sorry.
1 minute.
Are you asking for examples of keynote presentations or?
I guess Max means keynote presentation. Max, please write something. Events that usually take place in September.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand what the exact question is being asked there. Like what you should do for a keynote event, like how you should prepare.
Max means recent presentation without Steve Jobs. Without.
Oh.
Yes.
Is that what he means? Okay.
Yes. Okay.
One recent presentation that is coming to mind. There's a presentation given at TEDx Berlin. You guys, are you aware of TED Talks? So TEDx Berlin had a man in the last few years speaking about nuclear power. I don't know if you might have to just put it in Google and search like addressing myths of nuclear power, TEDx Berlin. It's an American scientist giving a lecture on a topic that a lot of people obviously have strong feelings about. And so he does a really good job in this presentation of warming people up to his unique perspective on nuclear power. And so I thought that was an interesting presentation, both from a technical standpoint where he's presenting a lot of data, but also from a standpoint where he needs to really win over the audience as a person. So TEDx Berlin, nuclear power, it's an American scientist from Colorado. I wish I had the link for you, but that's one of the things that we'll send out after.
Okay, thank you. We have questions, and next question is about questions and answers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What about situation when someone from the audience asks you the question that you can't answer? It's a good question, thank you.
Yeah.
Frequent situation, yes.
I'll answer this in two parts, and Q&A is one of the things that I normally would put in a longer presentation about this because there's a little bit of strategy you can employ. In a technical presentation, you can leave out frequently asked questions or critical details that you expect people to ask. And in that way, you can often predict which questions are going to be asked and be prepared. A second point would be in a technical presentation to have an appendix so that if you maybe don't have a good answer for something right away, you can show them a slide with data or show them specifications, but you don't want to flip back through all your slides. That looks really bad on stage. So instead, it's good to have an appendix you can flip to after your thank you slide that shows a whole bunch of information that can help you answer technical questions that you might not have stored in your head. And the third thing about a question that you don't know, and if you don't have any other way to answer it, the best thing to say is, I don't know, we'll look into that. That's all you can do. Just be honest and give a smile. Or, I mean, maybe you also have some inkling of a follow-up question that they want to ask because you can't answer. So you might be able to say, yes, we've thought of that. We don't have an answer right now, but we are looking into it. And here's an answer to here's our thinking about it at this present time. So it's always good to say something, but honesty is the best thing to do overall.
Useful advice, thank you. One question from designer: why one screen with 3 items is better than 3 screens with 1 item? Can we avoid lists and show each item separately?
Yeah, so that also is highly effective. And so that's where we have to strike a balance based on our presentation, right? So in a presentation where we might distribute the materials after, it's good to group things on the screen logically. So if I'm going to share this presentation with you, it's good if you can see boom, 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 3 points to remember. And that is also highly effective for technical presentations. From a designer standpoint, you have a good point. If your presentation is well rehearsed and you have good points that don't require a lot of technical information, putting just a picture or a blank placeholder slide on the screen while you talk is super effective for making sure the audience is staying on you. And that one point at a time thing is super useful. But on the other hand, it's good to remember that sometimes people will want to reference what was on the screen before. And so I've also given presentations where I'm presenting one version of the deck, but the people are also holding in their hand a more detailed and written out version of everything. So in case they have technical hangups, they can read it there. So I would say you're 100% right from a strict design standpoint. The less on the screen, the better. But from there's a balance to be that you have to strike based on how technical the presentation is and how you're going to share it later on.
Thank you, Evan. And one more question from Yulia about webinars and online presentation. Could you advise special techniques? Yulia heard that Zoom meetings are psychologically complicated for people and they become more tired than offline communication. Is it true? And what should we do to be effective?
That's a great question. And that's something obviously I've had to learn a little bit, going into this. So let's talk first about variables. So we did our best to control all of our variables to the best of our ability. So let me show you here. I'll just pick up my laptop and show you that I'm sitting in a makeshift studio. And while I might not have Zoom expertise myself, doing the little things like using a key light or a drop light to make sure that I stand out from the background, that you're not having too many on-screen distractions while I'm presenting is important. And obviously, we're working with different technologies that we don't often use for presentations, such as Zoom. So what Anna and I did was join a call a couple of days ago and do a dry run and make sure everything works. So practicing the parts of the presentation you don't have control of during the presentation is the best thing you can do if it's a webinar or any other kind of presentation. So that's what I would say about that. And your point about Zoom meetings being dry is real, and it also is a problem when you might be presenting something where other people might be jumping in. So using those techniques about pace and volume are really key to letting people know you're not done speaking, and that you're going to continue your point, or that they should maybe put their focus on you. So everything that we did that was a verbal trick to get the attention on you, you have to amplify when you're doing a webinar, because obviously you're not standing, moving on stage and interacting with the audience. Unfortunately, I can't see all of you. And actually, I found that makes me a little more nervous than normal. I generally like to get in front of the audience, smile, see how everybody's feeling. And then you can be like, oh, we're just having a conversation. But here I feel like I'm speaking to myself. So that's a little more difficult. So I'm having to use a little more of the techniques to signal to you to trust me than I maybe would on stage in a room with you.
Thank you. Next question from Konstantin. Hi, Evan. How do you handle toxic audience? I know that it's an extreme case, but if you have a person who just dislikes your position, technology, or maybe even competitors with you and stars and gets to the weak points of your presentation constantly, what are you doing?
Ooh, now that is a really tough question. If they're being adversarial, as in they don't like you, the best thing to do would be to just try to ignore them. I have had audiences, though, where they've been kind of difficult. For instance, I was one time giving a presentation to some executives from Boeing Phantom Works. So they are the people in the US who work on top secret like military and weapons testing for Boeing. And I got on stage after another group's presentation where they presented a user device that would measure alcohol content. And I got up on stage under the legal drinking age in the United States, and the boss at Boeing immediately made a joke toward me when I got on stage, asking if I thought that was a good idea or if I would use that to party. And I had to quickly come up with an answer that would be both respectful, because I'm not of age, and also funny enough and interesting enough to that executive that he still likes me. And so what I did was I made a joke about my mom also being in the audience, and so I couldn't comment. And it got a chuckle out of the crowd, and it totally took that weird aggressive energy that he was sending towards me, where he was commanding the room, and I took command of the room back. I made a joke, put on a big smile, and everybody said, okay, he's in charge of the room. He's in front of the room.
Thank you. No questions? Maybe one question from me.
Yeah.
Maybe can you advise how the way to start public speaking, because many people are afraid of speaking loudly, and I think that they need to start, and then it would be easier to continue. But how to make the first step?
Yeah. The first step is hard, right? It's the part that you yourself have to overcome. And practice is really the only way to get better. But I have worked with people and been on teams of people and presented with people who certainly were not comfortable doing it. And they would say, oh, I'm an engineer and I'm not good at presenting. And they rest there, right? They're like, this is okay. And it is in a lot of cases, which is why you have me presenting with you. But at the same time, you might have to deliver some stuff. So the best thing to think about is that you know your stuff. You should trust in what you do every day. And the best way to start presenting is presenting things you're passionate about and things that you know about. Because you can get on stage and you're not going to have those blank moments where you all of a sudden forget how to do your job. You know how to do your job. So if you're presenting on things that you know how to do, that should help you not be too nervous. But nerves are normal. Obviously, I was a little nervous about doing a webinar as opposed to an in-person presentation like I'm more used to. If I was giving a presentation for a lot more senior people at a big conference, I would still be quite nervous. But it doesn't mean that, nerves are good. Nerves are just telling your body that this is an occasion and that you should be ready. And it helps you focus. So if you've rehearsed your main points and you're not worried about hitting a script that you're going to stumble over, and you know you've done your preparation, then just go up there and have a conversation with the audience and tell them about what you know. And I think you'll find that you settle in to being in front of people pretty quickly.
Thanks. I hope it will help. And one more question from Yulia about clothes. She asked if the official style better or worse, and what style do you prefer when
For
you're
clothes?
speaking about clothes? Yes.
So
Casual or official?
This is a good question too. It depends on what kind of speaker you want to be. I'd say it's a case-by-case basis. If I was presenting to someone much senior to me, I would dress to their level. If I am presenting to people who are equivalent to me, and I want them to be really comfortable, I might dress a bit casual. And sometimes you can even be really powerful by dressing way more casual or way more professional than the crowd. So it's kind of about understanding what you're getting yourself into. For instance, when I give presentations to classmates who are my age, when I gave presentations in school, I would often not wear a tie. I wear my suit open when suits were required, because it kind of gives that little bit, hi, I'm extra comfortable here. But when I was a younger person speaking to executives at Boeing, a lot of people were wearing business casual, but I wore a full suit because I wanted them to know to take me seriously. So it really is up to you. I would say that be comfortable is the most important part. So as long as what you want to wear isn't a distraction from your presentation, wear that.
Thanks. Maybe we unmute our guests and somebody wants to ask you by voice or give you feedback about this presentation. I unmute all, and if you want to ask Evan, please do it. Don't hesitate.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very interesting and useful.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
One more question in the chat from Sergey. He asked about honesty. Does it make sense to speak about downsides of your product? Good question.
Yeah, so that is a good question. And once again, I have to say it's a contextual thing. If we're talking about an industry where whoever you're presenting to might be already aware of your downfalls, right, your weaknesses, it can be good to address them and then talk about how you're working on them, why maybe they're actually not a concern for you, or how you're covering for that weakness in the meantime. I would say, however, if you have a weakness that is an out-and-out weakness that you don't have a plan for, but you think might come up, don't mention it, and save it for Q&A. Maybe bring some stats, bring some backup in your appendix, and so that if someone does challenge you about a weakness, you can present them with something that can support you a little bit. Honesty is most key, I think, in terms of being yourself on stage. Obviously, the content of your presentation is going to be down to the strategy and the context that you understand. And so being yourself and being honest about who you are on stage is really the key point. Whether or not you want to talk about a weakness of a product is a case-by-case basis.
Good point. Thank you. Questions, guys?
Good.
We haven't questions. So let's finish our
All right.
webinar. Thank you, Evan. It was very interesting and useful presentation.
I really appreciate everybody
Okay.
coming. Seriously. It was I had fun doing it. I hope everybody got at least a trick or two that they could use, or at least thought about maybe how they're going to present in a different way. So
Yes, I hope that we will use your practical tips and trips. And Yulia wrote that really helpful. Thank you.
good. I'm glad.
We are
Thank you.
grateful for you, and you're welcome in Russia.
Oh, maybe someday I'll get to visit.
So
Appreciate
then
you.
we will be able to organize a meetup offline, I hope, with your
Someday.
participation. Yes.
Someday. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, guys. We will send you video and presentation.
One last point for everybody at
Okay.
DSR. If you have a presentation coming up and you want to get in contact with me, do not hesitate to send me a message on whatever you want, email, Skype. I'm happy to answer it and happy to help you with your presentations and look over them. So always willing to do that. And I'd love more people to feel comfortable and excited about presenting and creating content for DSR.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.